So hi everybody, my name is Dan Zenkraff. I'm a Senior Principal Consultant with CA Technologies. And today we're going to talk a little bit about metrics and continuous delivery pipelines, looking at the ways to make your pipeline fast and efficient and ways to make the apps better and higher quality. Before we get too far into it, I have to give the official disclaimer. You have now been officially disclaimed. So what we're going to talk about today is metrics. We talk about a lot of different things in the DevOps movement, but metrics kind of is an important thing that we talk about but don't really talk very much in depth about. So I thought I'd take some time and get into that as a topic, kind of help everybody optimize their flow. But in order to do that, because it gets neglected so often, is how do we get in and instrument our processes, understand some good ways to peel back the onion, get our arms around our processes, and put instrumentation where it needs to go. Look at a couple of techniques for doing that, and then some examples of things you could or should be measuring as part of your flow. Now, in the DevOps movement, we talk a lot about CAMs. And this comes from the fact that the DevOps movement, unlike the Agile movement, doesn't really have a manifesto. Agile kind of codified its views and beliefs. And DevOps's core pillars have sort of evolved more over time to take on this notion of what we call CAMs, the culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. And I've been involved in the DevOps movement really since we had a buzzword for it. Well, really before, but since we've had a buzzword for it. And over the years, as I've seen things evolve, I see a lot of discussions about culture and how we embed transformation in our organizations. And a lot of conversations tend to funnel down to it. We talk a lot about automation. It's a very powerful way to make an immediate difference in things, and really get that quick win. And it's exciting because it's very action. You can see stuff happening there. We talk about measurement, and we do a lot of sharing. We have DevOps Days events all over the world, and the proliferation of those events is really wonderful to see. I'm actually one of the organizers for DevOps Days Austin, and we had 600 people there last year. So we share our learnings and we share our observations, and it's really pretty awesome. It's a very vibrant space to be in right now. But as you notice, as I went through those pillars, I gave measurement short shrift. That was part deliberate, in part because it actually kind of does get shortchanged a lot of times. It's closely related to automation, and we talk tons about automation. Automation is awesome. We want to automate all the things. But what we find as we bring automation and DevOps and continuous delivery initiatives into our enterprises, there are certain things that we need to think about that may be a little bit more challenging, like where do we start? Got to answer that question. How do we know we're making progress? So once we've got some automation, how do we know that our improvements to that automation actually make things better? And once we do have some that we're pretty happy with, how do we know we're actually getting value from that effort, from the amount of maintenance we're putting into it? Are we really doing the right things? Those questions are perhaps a little less exciting. But they're critical in a business context for embedding automation and DevOps and continuous delivery practices into our daily lives. And that's what brings us to metrics. Metrics is the lingua franca for how we validate that we're doing the right things in business, that we're getting value from our activities. We love the metrics. And when I was doing some research for this, it was pretty interesting to see how far back this fascination with metrics goes in society as a whole, right? It's pretty easy to go back and find quotes from the 19th century where people are commenting on metrics from one way or another. Various management gurus have of course, talked about metrics and the importance of data to drive your business, but authors and literary figures also do it. And what I found really interesting was that the one from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, obviously out of the Sherlock Holmes space, was his emphasis on look at the data, look at the evidence, and follow the evidence and the data to its proper conclusion. Don't put your own opinions on the data. And that's very much of a formal 19th century kind of a way to express the big data dictum that we talk about today, which is follow the data. still current after 150 years, and or however long, a very long time either way. And we actually just last week got kind of a little validation that if people don't look at the data and really understand what the data is telling them, they might get kind of a surprise. So with that in mind, it's kind of important to understand a little bit about metrics in general. Let's talk about what metrics are and go through a little refresher course of the types of metrics that are out there. In general, metrics boil down to one of two types. There are what we call result metrics, which are sort of an outcome metric. We've done some number of activities, and we've been doing these activities, and this is the top line thing that we expect to come out of it. Revenue and profit in business are great examples of result type metrics. All the operations of sales and marketing turn into revenue, and the overall activity of the company is a core driver of profit. However, those activities that we're talking about across a broad spectrum that drive those result metrics are governed by metrics of their own down at the activity level. Those are what we call performance metrics. And they're so we know that the process is working well, we're doing the right things, and we know that we're actually impacting those things. A lot of people will say, well, just figure out what the big metrics are and just do stuff that sort of drives towards that. That's not really a very good way to do it, because at the end of the day, you don't have good control to improve things. You don't know what to do on a day-to-day basis to make the end goal better. And that's why, in reality, you really have to have a good alignment between your performance metrics and your result metrics. They have to feed each other and support each other. And so when we look at metrics in the context of continuous delivery, we don't have that many data points. There's not a lot of advice on this out there. If you go back and look at the continuous delivery book, the classic from the space, the seminal work for the continuous delivery processes, you'll find it's a book about that thick, and if you're generous, 12 pages talk about metrics. It's really, really not very much, and most of those 12 pages are devoted to simply the cycle time of your activities. Very tactical, very low-level type stuff. Now, as the DevOps movement has taken hold and grown and adopted a lot of learnings from the lean movement and lean manufacturing and a lot of those lessons, a lot of the conversation has come down to lead time. We like to talk about lead time, make it so that everything from the first request to ultimate delivery is optimized for the shortest time possible. And that's good, but it doesn't actually tell you how to do it. Both of those are really kind of more result metrics, particularly in an enterprise context. Cycle time's a little gray, but in the way it gets used, especially in an enterprise, it very quickly turns into a result metric for at least something. And that's where we need to talk about the performance metrics and how we balance those out over time. And it just is a fundamentally more complicated discussion in an enterprise context. So given that, the next question I usually get when I'm talking to people about this is, well, okay, we are an enterprise. How do we start to break this down? And I usually start with, let's talk about a common technique, again, out of the lean manufacturing world, of how we can put our arms around a big, complicated process, break it down into reasonable things that we can look at and take action on to make things better. And value stream mapping sets out and says, okay, what are all the activities, again, from request to delivery? In manufacturing terms, it's order to delivery to an end customer. In software delivery terms, it's singular change. How much time does it take for me to make a change at the very beginning of development and deliver it to an end user? What's that? And that's your lead time. Now, the thing that makes value stream mapping handy is because we look at all the core steps involved in delivering lead time. We look at the cycle time of those steps, but we also look at the wait time between those steps. And that's wait time is where nothing's happening. Something's been done, we have work happening to that change, but no one's actually working on it at this point in time. And that's where we get the notion of work in progress, or WIP. Right? And it's effectively waste in the process. Nothing's happening, things are sitting still, no value is being added. Hence the name value stream. But when we look at an enterprise software delivery process, we get a little bit daunted, shall we say. Enterprise delivery processes are complex things. They actually sort of incorporate multiple value streams when you look at it at a departmental level. When I break it down to my individual team, well, the team has a value stream where it gets a request and delivers it to its internal customer. So you have all these little value streams trying to come together to get some common thing done at a much more meta level. So anytime we try and put an application into an environment, we have to deal with a number of processes. First, at the beginning, we have to get all four major components of the application together. No application is just the code, right? You got the code, that's clearly important. It's the business functionality and logic, but we also have to worry about the data that drives that, database changes and all the things related to data to make the application work. We have networking considerations to make sure that everything connects to each other and the various parts of the application can talk to each other, as well as the broader audience. And of course, the infrastructure stack, the operating system, the middleware, the libraries, all the software dependencies that the application needs and the application code needs to run in the first place. Now, once we have all of our stuff together into a unit that we can say, well, we've got something that we can put into an environment, well, then the environment itself comes into play. We have to make sure that we've provisioned an environment, we've configured that environment to some known point, and then we can deploy the app, all those changes I was just talking about, the four pieces, into that environment, or on top of that configuration, make the application-specific changes and deliveries that are required. And finally, once we've got all of that there, we have to validate that we got what we expected out at the end, right? Once the thing's up and running, we put that environment and the changes into it for some reason. We have to go in and run a process that validates we got what we expected out the end of it. All those are done by different departments, all of which represent their delivery of that result and an analysis or whatever they're doing is its own little value stream. And that's just one environment. Where it gets hairy is that when you talk about a pipeline, there are multiple environments involved. All too often, I end up talking to enterprises where they literally have different groups doing the same function, but in different environments, and all that stuff has to be coordinated. And the lesson from this, and this complexity that we've injected on ourselves is, well, one, it's complicated, probably unnecessarily so in a lot of cases, but be that as it may, it's where we're starting, and it's what we need to instrument to metric a process and ultimately, gain some understanding of what we've got so that we can then eventually improve it. You have to have visibility at both of these levels. You have to know what that overall flow is across environments and through environments, but you also have to know about what's being put in, what each of those sort of gross top-level steps, the big steps, those mini value tributary streams, what they're doing and what they're delivering and how well they're delivering it. Once you've got all of those things together, you can build a system of metrics that give you the performance metrics you need as well as the result metrics you need to understand how efficiently you're running and ultimately why it's efficient or not. So with this, we get into a couple of different types of metrics. When you start talking about efficiency, you're dealing with the flow type metrics, right? How long does it take me to get the four pieces of an app together? How long does it take me to get to that deployable change set? In each environment, I can look at, well, how long does it take me to go through those steps? How long does it take me to provision, configure the environment, deploy stuff onto it, and so on? And what's my failure rate at each of those steps? How often does something go wrong when I'm configuring things? And that can be hard if your processes are kind of manual, because you're still doing manual stuff. Humans tend to self-correct when they get things, or they just start fixing things without saying that, well, it broke. So it can be a little bit tricky, and that's part of the reason that one of the metrics you want to have here is reduce the manual tasks. Am I reducing my manual tasks? If I look at the list of things going on here and the list of at least the top level value streams, are the number of them that are governed by manual steps going down? And when I apply automation, is the amount of maintenance I'm applying on the automation, going down. Right? That tells you how mature your automation is it needs less maintenance. Okay? The other dimension is you need to look at the quality of what's going on in each of those phases. Right? So in other words, are we doing it efficiently? That's good. Are we doing it well? Because if you're not doing it well, you will take a hit on efficiency because you have to do something called rework, which in the lean world is very bad, and really in manufacturing in general is very bad. In business, it's very bad. It goes back to the old aphorism that if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when are you going to have time to do it again? And these metrics are the ones that become very discipline specific. These are the ones that are associated with individual practitioner areas and skill groups. Right? This is where we want to look at the code quality from developers. There's tons of, and there's the great thing about these is that there's actually tons of stuff written at a very tactical level for the individual practitioner groupings. There's plenty of stuff about is your code good quality? Is are features being delivered complete? So it's a simple quality metric that says, okay, well, once I get a feature done and the developers have delivered me good quality code, how far does that code go before it's rejected by the testing and qualification process? If it gets kicked out during my functional testing type things, I need to go back and look hard at how I'm measuring my code quality. If it goes far, but it gets rejected at UAT, that tells me something different. That tells me that I may be developing brilliantly, but I'm not understanding the requirements. And that's a different problem. I'm going to fix those two problems very differently. What's my rate of feedback-based rework? When I do put change sets into an environment, so assuming I get good change sets, when I put them into an environment, how often does it break? We stand up the environment perfectly. How often does it break at the end? Before I run my validation, maybe I run a smoke test that the changes got applied to the environment properly. How often does that fail? Do I have a decrease in an unintended breakage rate? How am I driving that failure rate down? When I get it into production, am I delivering healthy, maintainable, supportable code? Do I have problems? Right? So it all gets through the qualification, and I have problems in production. Well, maybe I'm not qualifying things the way I should. Right? How am I looking at the features that are running in production and giving that feedback back to my marketing people or my product management people? What you're seeking to build and what we, CA, are looking at when we look at these life cycles and iterative development or waterfall, it doesn't really matter. You can benefit from systems metrics like this, is we have a set of tools that are designed to take friction out of these activities and allow you visibility in at the practitioner level. So at the quality level, we help you figure out, well, what are your agile metrics? Are you burn down, your agile, well-established things of knowing what your team velocity is, your burn down in an agile team, code quality, what's test coverage, is any unapproved open source getting injected into my code base, variety of testing cycles, testing cycle metrics, both at the functional and UAT level. And then ultimately the monitoring tools that we have to let you know how well things are going once they get out in production and in the hands of your end users. And with all of those things put together, we're able to build a system that gives the quality metrics to the individual practitioners using various tools in our portfolio, but also with the release automation and CDE type tools, understand what those top level flows mean and bring it all together into something coherent. For example, in the lab right now, based on customer feedback, we have some work being done on our CDE product. And CDE is a really interesting product because it's working to up level to the top level flow of people's software delivery pipelines. Obviously we've been in the automation business for a long time, and CDE came out of customer requests to have that higher level visibility across app teams and across broad release cycles, We have stuff in the lab there, for example, where when you've got a good system of these metrics together, you can build a dashboard like this. Gives you the top level KPIs, and ultimately can be used where you can apply analytics to those metrics and ultimately give a score of how healthy that release is and identify problems in your release pipeline as it goes. That's the vision of what metrics can bring. This is still lab level work. It's not in the products yet anyway, but it's the kind of thing that we've seen possible, we've seen customers look for and talk about, and the kind of visibility that the thought leaders that we're fortunate enough to work with see coming when you apply systems of metrics to your release cycles. Now, there's work to get there, and I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Your homework assignment is to go out and understand your performance and results metrics. What would a system be like for you? How would they relate to each other? Go in, break down your value streams, do it at both levels, and identify those instrumentation points so you can hook the metrics in. Track both your efficiency and quality metrics, and be sure and listen to them. Listen to your metrics and apply the lessons they're teaching you so that at the end of the day, you can deliver more software with better quality faster. Thank you.